Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. It was an absolutely huge day at the Karen Reed trial. We got the big moment that everybody has been waiting for and the answer to the question, why doesn't the prosecution want Trooper Proctor to come to trial? We had some hints, but we had no idea just how very much the prosecution would not want Trooper Proctor to come to trial, and now we're starting to get an idea. So Karen Reed, as you know, is on trial in Massachusetts. She's accused of hitting her boyfriend with her car, knocking him down, harming him, leaving him to die in the snow. But her defense team says she's not the one who did this. Her defense team says this isn't about what she did. This is a frame up. This is a cover up by people who were inside the house where she was dropping him off, that these people were covering up for people inside the house who were related to cops, and they were setting up Karen Reed to take the fall. So that's what the case is all about. Today we had two huge events, or subjects, I guess you would say, and then one extremely important moment that I bet a lot of people miss. So I want to be sure to mention that to you. So the three categories we're going to talk about tonight, the three topics, we're going to revisit that issue about the inverted video. We covered that on Friday, and I did a video on that on Saturday that I dropped. So we're going to be covering that. The second thing we're going to be talking about is the very I should move this closer to me. Today was just all crazy. We had internet issues all day long, so I'm just hoping we make it through. So the second area is the very damaging text messages from Trooper Proctor that are an extreme embarrassment to the prosecution. And we're going to talk about how much damage they are going to do to the prosecution's case. And the third is that issue I wanted to talk to you about. It was a statement by a relatively small minor witness about the taillight on Karen Reed's car. So those are our three categories that we're going to cover tonight. And I think what I'm going to do, I've been debating this. I think I'm going to start with the inverted video and go next to Trooper Proctor's text messages, the very, very embarrassing text messages. So don't tune away before we get to that, because they are something else. Let me tell you what, never seen anything like that at a trial. So let's talk just real quickly about that inverted video. We talked about it last week. Officer Buchnick, during his direct examination, which I think was all the way back on Wednesday now of last week, the prosecution showed the jury a video of Karen's vehicle being driven into the Sally Port at the Canton Police Station. Now, this is supposedly the vehicle she hit her boyfriend with. And the vehicle had been impounded, and it was being driven into this Sally Port at the Canton Police Department in the late afternoon, early evening of the day John O'Keefe had been found nearly dead and quickly died after that on the lawn of the Albert home. So the number one problem, as you can tell by the fact that I'm even calling it the inverted video, was that the prosecution did not tell us that what Trooper Buchnick was what he was narrating and telling us about was in fact an inverted video. He told us it was a fair and accurate representation of the scene when this vehicle was brought in. The prosecutor asked him whether Trooper Proctor or he had gone anywhere near Karen's cracked taillight, which was on the passenger side. So we thought we could clearly see they had not. But as it turns out, on cross-examination, the defense lawyers brought out that the video the witness was telling us about was inverted. So we should have been looking at the other side. The cracked taillight, since it was a mirror image, was on the opposite side from us. So I used a program to invert that video and posted that Saturday night. And I asked you whether you thought it made a difference in the way you perceived the video. Overwhelmingly, you did. So today, the defense did the same thing for the jury. They posted a video with it correct. In other words, they took out the inversion. Their video was about a minute longer than mine, so there were some extra spots they had that I didn't have. So the witness said, well, even though it was inverted, it was still true. It was fair and accurate. But Karen Reed's lawyer, I thought this was really interesting analogy, compared it to a man who committed a crime, and all the witnesses come in and say he had this huge tattoo on the left arm, and they invert a picture and they show a man with a tattoo on the right arm, and all the witnesses say, well, I guess that wouldn't be it. His tattoo was on his left arm. So in this particular case, I thought that was a pretty good analogy for giving people an idea of why it might really matter. Now, the prosecution objected to that question. The witness did not answer the question because the judge sustained the objection. But we got the point just from the question that he was trying to say it could make a difference. So the second problem the defense pointed out today was that the video timestamp was not inverted. So the video was, but the timestamp on it remained the same. And so that's a blue timestamp that ran along the bottom. And what the defense is saying is, how could that be if it's not intentional? The only way you can invert the video without inverting the timestamp is if you intentionally did that. You separate the two and you intentionally do that. The third problem with the video brought out by the defense was missing time. Karen Reed's lawyer, Alan Jackson, pointed out that the video timestamp begins at 5:30 and 23 seconds and ends at 5:48 and 15 seconds. So there should be nearly 18 minutes of footage. Instead, the video is 5 minutes and 51 seconds. So about 2/3 of the video isn't there at all. Buetnick suggested, he was the trooper testifying, that maybe the video cut in and out because it's motion activated. So people would move and it would start up and then they'd be still and it would cut out. And maybe that's why there wasn't a consistent video throughout that period. But one of the things that you could clearly see, and that's true in what I posted Saturday night as well, you can go back and look at that. It was kind of interesting to watch it one way and then the other way. With so many sections missing, the video comes out sort of eerie. You know, people will suddenly materialize and then they'll just vanish into thin air. They'll be walking and suddenly there's no one there, or they'll be still, there will be nothing there and suddenly a person will appear. So the defense suggests, though, that it's a lot more serious than just something related to timing and motion activation. That they say what is happening is that it is directly correlated with the moments when Trooper Proctor is standing behind the vehicle at the passenger taillight. That taillight is extremely controversial and important because what the defense says, the prosecution says, one of the ways we know Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe, her boyfriend, is her taillight's broken. How did it get broken? It got broken because she ran into her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, and killed him. But Karen Reed's defense team says that's not how it happened. She backed into a car as she was leaving to go look for John O'Keefe. That's on Ring camera. You can actually see it. And they say that's when the taillight got cracked. So the question of this cracked taillight and how cracked it was, extremely important in the case. So the fourth issue was a white object that was in there, and I had some pictures of it for you, but with all the excitement in the internet, I wasn't able to pull them up. If any of you, I'm just curious, if any of you were watching the trial today and you saw that small white object sitting in the snow next to where Karen Reed's car pulled up. They didn't explain what it was. They just asked what it was, and the trooper didn't know. I didn't either. But I figure we're going to hear more about it. I had no idea what it was. If you know, give me the preview in the comments. I am curious. So, and the fifth thing we got was new video. This was new video of the garage, this time where Karen's vehicle was coming in, this time from the side of the garage that would have a direct view of anybody standing next to the passenger side taillight that was cracked. But the quality was unbelievable. I mean, it was impossible to see. I couldn't make head nor tails out of it. So I have no idea what it was showing. It was just mostly dark with little flashes. That was it. So on redirect, Buetnick reiterated, this is when the prosecution comes back up. So the witness has been cross-examined by Karen Reed's lawyer, and now the prosecution gets a chance to rehabilitate and to do what's called a redirect of the witness. And there were a couple of points that they emphasized. One was Butenit said, I don't care whether it's shown on the video or not shown on the video. Trooper Proctor and I did nothing to manipulate that videotape. We got it this exact way from the camp police. If it's inverted, no matter what it is, we had nothing to do with it. The second thing he said was, we didn't tamper with that tail light. We didn't go near or manipulate the rear quarter panel. We absolutely did not. That's pretty close to a quote of what he said. So that was just, I wanted to go ahead and finish up that issue because it's such an important issue. But now I want to hit the bombshell issue of the day. Trooper Michael Proctor came and testified. It was not known whether he would. He's the lead investigator. So it would have been very strange and unusual if he had not testified. But in this particular case, there were lots of controversy swirling around him, even a federal investigation looking apparently into his conduct in this case. So there were reasons why the prosecution might not want to bring him. Throughout the trial, the defense has baited it, said Trooper Proctor would know this. Trooper Proctor's the only one, right? Trooper Proctor. And they've talked about him. The jury knows all about him. It would have certainly been remarkable if the prosecution hadn't brought him. And then the defense said, if they don't, we're going to, which would have been a whole new can of worms in and of itself. So all of those things, there were all of those various issues made, I've lost my train of thought. I hate it when I do that. So anyway, we're on Trooper Michael Proctor and what he was talking about. So the defense says Trooper Proctor was biased against Karen Read. He set out to frame her. That was his whole point. They gave us a little hint during opening arguments about that. They said he was looking on her phone for nude photographs of her, which was shocking information. But at that point, that was about all. There was way more. We found out through his text messages, much more that he had done. So the prosecution knew that he had these text messages. They knew that he was going to be controversial. So they started to try to insulate him in advance. They knew the defense was going to be gunning for him. So I'm going to go through some of the things they did to try to insulate him, to try to convince the jury that what he was saying was still accurate. And I'm going to let you be the judge. What do you think about how it worked? And so these are some of the things. I'll just go through kind of a list of some of the things they did to try to convince the jury that he should be insulated from these criticisms. They knew it was coming. It wasn't like it was a surprise. So he informed us, for example, that he did not in advance know the three women who were at the scene when the body was discovered: Jennifer McCabe, Karen Read, the defendant, or Carrie Roberts. He didn't know any of the three of them. He also said he had never met Brian Albert. He's the homeowner. He owned the home along with his wife, Nicole, where John O'Keefe was found in the front yard. Karen's story is she was dropping him off at this house for an after party. They were both invited, but she was going to go on home for the night. He was going in for the after party with some people he knew. They'd been at bars drinking earlier. She says he got out, he went in. The prosecution says, no, he didn't. You ran into him with your car on the lawn before he ever got inside. The people inside the house, including the party goers, most of whom were related or were close friends, they say John O'Keefe never came in the house. So the witness, Proctor, said, well, I didn't know Brian Albert, the homeowner. He did admit he knew Julie and Chris Albert and their son, Colin. Those are all of interest because Chris Albert is the brother of Brian Albert, who owned that house. His son, Colin, is one of the people the defense thinks may have been responsible for murdering John O'Keefe. They think John O'Keefe was murdered inside the house and brought outside and dumped on the lawn in an effort to frame Karen Read. So the witness Proctor said that Chris Alberts, this is complicated. I should have put up our chart from True Crime Library. Chris is Brian's brother, and Julie babysat for Trooper Proctor's sister's kids. Did you follow that? So he said he told his supervisors about this connection, and nobody seemed to be concerned. It was no big deal from the perspective of the police. He also pointed out that he was with Sergeant Butnick, his supervisor, the whole day. He wasn't by himself where he could damage or tamper with evidence. In all the interviews of the witnesses, he pointed out too, there was another officer there. So he wasn't alone with witnesses so that he could make up what they said or coach them, something like that. He also pointed out that he turned evidence in so that if it wasn't available to him, it was in the evidence locker put up by the people responsible for that. He didn't have direct access without signing it in or out. He reiterated, just like Butnick did, that he never touched any part of the vehicle. What Karen Reed's team thinks happened, they think that taillight was broken by, or maybe if not broken more by Trooper Proctor, and pieces of that were then intentionally scattered at the scene as part of the effort to frame Karen Reed. So one of the critiques is, well, you kept going back to the scene and finding more pieces of that cracked taillight and more evidence like a shoe and a hat. And they said, how did you miss that? Why didn't you see that the first time you looked? And in fact, he talked about there were 4 different occasions when they found pieces of that taillight, January 29th, and then February 8th, and February 11th, and February 18th. Trooper Proctor says, well, the reason for that is on the 29th, when this happened, there were 2 feet of snow, and it didn't really warm up for a while. So then a heavy rain came, the snow melted, and more evidence began showing up. The witness also talked about the fact that O'Keefe was missing 1 shoe. And initially there was objection, but finally got in that does often happen when a pedestrian gets hit by a car. So the story they're saying is that there was 1 shoe on John O'Keefe, 1 shoe was off him, missing. According to Trooper Proctor, he found that shoe buried in the snow at the curb, where not far from where John O'Keefe's body was found. And there was Karen Reed's story is that she backed into O'Keefe's car at her house. That's on Ring video, as I mentioned. So there could have been, Proctor says there's no significant damage to O'Keefe's car. And I'm going to just show you. This is the picture of O'Keefe's car. So Trooper Proctor brought this and said that this is how the vehicle looked after it was hit by Karen Reed's car. And his point was, if O'Keefe's car had that little damage, how is it going to break the taillight on Karen Reed's car? It would be virtually no damage to her car as well. I have to say, having seen several times now that video, it does seem like a really minor impact. I wonder about that too. Let's pull that out and I'll go ahead and talk. And I'm going to go ahead and stop for just a minute and thank a few people. First of all, Helen, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. And we've got Kay Coco as a new member. Welcome. And JB Kids Go says, most of Proctor's testimony was about his inappropriateness. What a waste. And that is what we are about to get to, because you're not kidding, JB. You are not kidding. That is exactly true. So we have 2 new members, DL and your True Crime Library. Really appreciate that. And Sandra, thank you so much for the super sticker. I'm going to start there, and there's a couple more people I need to thank, but I will get back to that. The final thing, and let me make sure this is my final thing before I go telling you that. Yes, final thing that they did to try to inoculate him was talk about missing Ring camera video. There are 2 pieces of footage that are missing. The prosecution thinks the reason that's missing is because Karen Reed deleted it. She intentionally deleted Ring camera video from John O'Keefe's home. She was staying there for the evening. In fact, she apparently pretty much lived there. So she deleted this Ring camera video to try to hide something. Here's what they say is missing. First, Karen Reed would have had to pull into the garage that night because she pulled out in the morning. That's when she hit that car, John O'Keefe's car that was parked behind her. So if she pulled out, and then there should be a pulling in, and there's no ring camera footage of that. Another thing that's missing is Roberts, McCabe, and Reed looking at the taillight the next morning, because Karen Reed pointed out, they say right there in her driveway, said to them, look, this taillight is cracked, and pointed that out to them. But that also is not on the ring camera footage. So the witness, apparently, Trooper Proctor, tried to get footage or at least information from the Ring Corporation about whether or not something had been deleted. And it was really unclear what happened, but the bottom line was he didn't get it. He tried to testify that the Ring Corporation had told him there was a deletion, but the judge disallowed that and struck that answer and told the jury later, when I strike something, that means you can't consider it. So that did not come into evidence. So, all right, but let's get to the part that completely changed everything. Up until then, I would say we're still on direct. This is still the prosecution talking to Trooper Proctor. And up until now, I would say Trooper Proctor did really well. He seemed pretty competent, presented well, spoke well. Everything seemed to be going well. And now the prosecution, this is sort of just getting it out there, getting it over with. This is bad medicine, and they knew they had to take it. Trooper Proctor's own text messages. And they started to go through them. Well, these were horrendous. Here's how I'm going to show it to you. It's just a nightmare embarrassment for the prosecution. There's no other way to say that. So I'm going to show it to you this way. I'm going to show you the cross-examination on each of these points, and then tell you more text messages we know are coming, because that Trooper Proctor is still on the stand. The defense still has plenty of time to cross-examine Trooper Proctor, and will. So let's go ahead and listen to some of the cross-examination of Trooper Proctor, because
Proctor, in the summer of 2022, August 17th specifically, you were sitting at your desk, presumably alone at your office, at about 10 p.m. at night, going through my client's personal cell phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, you were sitting there texting with your friends and colleagues at Massachusetts State Police about you going through her personal cell phone. Is that right?
Correct, sir.
And that included Trooper DeChico, is that right?
DeChico, yes, sir.
Trooper Fanning, Trooper Buchnick, Trooper Moore, and Trooper Kutzkowski. Trooper Fanning and Trooper Buchnick are your supervisors.
Yes.
Okay, so I want you to appreciate the craft that went into that question. His first question, he could have just said, now you reviewed my client's cell phone, correct? But he didn't. He gave this picture around it. It was summer of 2022, August 17th specifically. You were sitting at your desk, presumably alone in your office at about 10 p.m. at night, going through what? My client's personal cell phone. So all of that created a picture for the jury. And now he's talking about that it was not just Trooper Proctor who had this issue with Karen Reed. There were other troopers who exhibited similar sorts of beliefs about Karen Reed. We're going to hear lots about this being department-wide, about it being everybody.
Proctor, Trooper DeChico had sent you a photograph of my colleague, Mr. Unetti, correct?
Yes.
And then your response was what?
I hate that man. I truly hate that man.
So just to be super clear, one trooper sent the lead investigator a photograph of the attorney for Karen Reed. That's who Mr. Unetti is. He's the attorney for her.
Actually, your response was, I'm going through his retarded client's phone right now, correct?
Yes, after the picture, sir, yes.
Who's the retarded client?
I was referring to Miss Reed, again, unprofessional language.
I'm asking for who you were referring to.
Miss
I know
Reed.
You got an explanation. Who was it you were referring to as retarded?
Miss Reed.
Karen Reed, the woman sitting to my left.
Yes, sir.
The subject of your investigation as a professional, correct?
Yes, sir.
As an unbiased, objective investigator, the person that you were investigating, you referred to your bosses as retarded, correct?
Again, poor language on my part.
Poor language is one way to put it. Completely offensive is another way to put it, right?
That was objected to, and the judge sustained it. But wasn't that a great question? Completely offensive is another way to put it. So Trooper Proctor, to his bosses, called Karen Reed, the subject of the investigation, retarded. And in the context of talking about her attorney, and said of the attorney, I hate him. I hate him. So, and all he has to say is, poor language. This is tough to defend against.
After you referred to my client as retarded, then you decided to make a comment about Mr. Yannetti, her lawyer, correct?
Correct.
And what did you say about Mr. Yannetti again?
I hate that man. I truly hate that man.
I hate that man. I truly hate him, correct?
Correct.
You didn't say I dislike him, disagree with him. You said I hate him, correct?
Correct, sir.
That's a visceral response to someone who's just doing a job, correct?
Objection.
Oh, sorry. Let me finish. The judge says sustained.
Sustained.
So the references to her attorney, wildly unprofessional, although frankly, that's almost a little more understandable. At least there's sort of a built-in animosity. This is what the lawyer has one side, the police have another, the defense versus the prosecution. But it's really difficult to understand when addressing the subject of the investigation. I mean, that's the part I think that concerns me the most. And it gets way more embarrassing for Trooper Proctor and for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
What did you tell your colleagues that you were looking for as you sat at almost 10 p.m. at night on a Wednesday night, August 17th, 2022, looking through Karen Reed's phone?
I didn't tell them I was looking through anything. They knew I was going through Miss Reed's phone. I provided a inappropriate joke as an update. They knew I was going through location data, text messages, Google searches. But like I had mentioned earlier, I had to stop.
Except Trooper Proctor, none of that really professional sounding stuff ended up in your comments to your bosses, did it?
Again, it was a poor joke.
Is that yes or no?
They did not know.
It did not.
No,
As a
sir.
matter of fact, what did you write after you talked about going through the, quote, retarded client's phone?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No nudes so far.
No nudes so far, correct?
Correct.
And you said that to your bosses.
Yes, sir.
You were looking for naked photographs of Miss Reed on a Wednesday night as you sat in your office at 9:44 p.m., correct?
No, not correct.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever looked for naked photos of a male suspect that you were investigating?
I don't look for naked photos in anyone's phones.
But you said you were looking for nudes of Miss Reed,
Like I had
correct?
said, Mr. Jackson, it was an inappropriate joke.
Sir, this is a citizen. She's a woman. You were supposed to be objectively investigating. Does your
So this is what we were told about for the first time in opening. It turns out it was maybe a little less pointed than I had assumed. He clearly was making a joke, not necessarily just looking for nudes. But the fact that he made the joke and made the joke to his bosses and that it was even in his mind says volumes. It's appalling. And Attorney Jackson is going to dig straight into why it was so problematic.
text message to your colleagues and Massachusetts State Police reflect an objective investigation of a citizen?
Objection.
You can get part of that question and ask it again.
Do you believe that your text messages were reflective of an objective investigator?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Do you believe that, Trooper Proctor?
I believe poor jokes have, in unprofessional language, have no bearing on the integrity and the facts and physical evidence of this case.
It's not that they don't have any bearing on the facts and integrity. It's that they have no place in a professional investigation because it shows bias, right?
Objection.
So I have to sustain that as asked. Go ahead and ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
You weren't so much as objectively investigating Karen Reed as objectifying her, correct?
That good or what?
I'll allow that.
Isn't that right?
Rephrase the question, please.
You weren't so much as objectively investigating her as objectifying her in those moments, correct?
Again, Mr. Jackson, it was a poor choice of words and a joke that I should not have texted out, but from the start of the investigation, we didn't know what we had.
And your, Trooper Proctor, your point in saying no nudes so far to your colleagues in Massachusetts State Police was to suggest that you were looking for nudes and you'd update them when you found them, correct?
Incorrect.
Is it? Give me your thoughts. Do you believe that if he had found nudes, he would have passed them around to the other people he was writing on this text message? Give me your thoughts. And you may be thinking, well, this is just Trooper Proctor. Surely he is the only person who would say this. And he probably got really dressed down by his superiors. They would not put up with this. I mean, they've had sensitivity training. Absolutely. There's no way they're going to allow this. Well, keep listening.
To be clear, when you sent those text messages on that group chat, those text messages included, as we said, or as you said, not one, but two of your supervisors, correct?
Correct.
Were you ever reprimanded for your conduct in sending that text message?
Objection.
So that's sustained. Do we need to go to sidebar based on what you told me earlier?
We do not.
Okay, so,
I'll ask it a different way.
okay.
Did either Trooper Fanning or Trooper Buchanan dress you down in a responsive text message in that text thread for doing something so abhorrent as looking for nudes or referring to nudes of a female suspect or subject of your investigation? Did that ever happen?
Not that I can recall.
As a matter of fact, in reference to one of the text messages in this same string, your boss, Yuri Buchanan, actually responded to the photo of Mr. Yannetti, didn't he?
Sure.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Sergeant Buchanan liked it.
Like what?
The going through his retarded client's phone, sir.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'll take my copy.
There you go.
So your supervisors at Massachusetts State Police not only didn't ride you for making comments like this, he encouraged it.
Objection.
Sustained.
Trooper Proctor, this is your direct chain of command. Is that right? Yuri Buchanan?
Yes, sir.
So I really would like your opinions about this. What do you think? How significantly is this going to hurt the prosecution? How significantly is it going to undermine what they've been trying to show, not just through Trooper Proctor, but through the string of witnesses that they brought up until now? What we've learned now is that his superior not only didn't reprimand him and didn't say, well, you shouldn't have said something like that. You shouldn't be talking about nudes and looking for nudes of a subject. Actually put a heart on it. Yep, like that one, or thumbs up. I don't know which, but liked the text. Speaking of which, I forgot to ask y'all to like the video. So please hit the like button. That'll really help the video get out to more people, and subscribe. We would love to have you come back for more. So let's keep listening. And I do want to, Cindy said that she thinks she heard a gasp when Proctor was called. I didn't notice that. I'll have to go back and listen to that. That's interesting. It was definitely built up. Everybody was wondering, would Trooper Proctor be called? I want to welcome Blake, who's a new member. And I want to thank Tiana for the super sticker. So let's listen to a little bit more.
Proctor, you'd agree that the hallmark of any good investigation, as you've been taught and others in the Massachusetts State Police have been taught, is that the investigation and the investigator have to be fair. They have to be impartial. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Meaning that the investigation has to be free of conflicts, right?
Yes, sir.
The investigator has to be free of conflicts, right?
Yes.
The investigation has to be free of bias. Is that right?
Correct.
You can't be biased against the person that you're investigating. That would compromise the entire thing, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Basically, you follow the evidence. You're supposed to follow the evidence wherever it takes you, right?
Correct.
Good or bad, top to bottom, just follow the evidence and report it back. That's how an investigation is supposed to be run, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And these are things that you learn early on at Massachusetts State Police Academy and then in your detective training. Isn't that right?
It is.
Literally, it's part of an oath that you took at the academy that you will, quote, faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all of the duties incumbent on you as a Massachusetts State Police trooper, right?
Yes, sir.
You swore that oath.
I did.
When you start an investigation, everybody in that investigation should be treated exactly the same. Don't you believe that's true?
Correct.
It's especially important early in an investigation, before all of the facts are known, that the investigator is not compromised by bias, prejudice, right?
Correct.
In other words, Trooper Proctor, you don't get to pick a suspect and then try to find evidence to support your choice, right?
Correct.
But in this case, it's exactly what you did, isn't it?
Absolutely not.
So notice the way that Jackson went through that. He asked a series of questions that Trooper Proctor would have to agree to. An investigator has to be free of conflicts. An investigation should be impartial. An investigator should be impartial. You can't be biased against the person you're investigating. Of course, he has to say, that's right. I absolutely have to be that. Yes, yes, yes. Correct, correct. And then he gets to the one question, but in this case, what you did was be biased. And he says, absolutely not. So he took him through this series of questions that he would have to agree to, and then followed up with a single question that he would say no and deny. So Trooper Proctor is free to deny all of this, but it has been made much more difficult by Trooper Proctor's own text messages. This is why the prosecution did not want to put Trooper Proctor on the stand. He was a good witness, I thought, on direct, but the defense has just dug up facts that undermine his credibility, his own statements in text messages during the course of the investigation. And these text messages fit the theme of the defense. The theme of the defense being that this is about framing Karen Read. So that's not all. We have more to come, probably will be addressed in cross-examination tomorrow. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll just give you a few other text messages that we'll probably hear about. Proctor was talking to some of his friends who were not in the police department, were not law enforcement. So these people shouldn't be hearing anything about the investigation. But what he's telling them is that there's going to be a serious charge. And one of the friends says, is she hot at least? And Proctor says, she's a whack job, and calls her the C word, which the judge and the prosecutor forced him to read aloud. And by the way, let me go to buy the book, who thank you for your super chat, saying Bev, meaning the judge, her first name is Beverly, seems disgusted with Proctor and is ruling more against. I completely agree. I thought when Alan Jackson asked the question, in fact, you're more objectifying her than being objective. And the prosecution objected, which could have gone either way. And the judge, I'm going to allow that. I would like an answer to that too. And I completely agree. I think she was upset about this. So, and there's more. He comments on her body specifically, saying she doesn't have an ass. I mean, it's inappropriate. And excuse me, I feel confident we will hear all about it tomorrow. There was also a comment where, is that chick a smoke? And he said, not bag, as Chief would say. I'm not even sure exactly what it means, but you can tell highly inappropriate. And then says, she's got a leaky balloon knot, leaks poo, and is making reference to the fact that she has a colostomy. With each of these, on prosecution, on direct examination by the prosecution, he said that was unprofessional. I regret it. But these are really seriously inappropriate comments, and I think that they are going to have an impact. I don't see how they don't. So I'm going to save the rest because there were some other good ones, and you definitely want to tune in tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Oh, wait, no trial tomorrow. So Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll cover that in more detail when he gets into the new text messages that have not been covered on cross. So I want to now get to a third area that I think a lot of people may not have noticed. It was a comment made by a relatively minor witness who just spoke for a little bit of time. His name was Nicholas Barrows. He's a 14-year veteran police sergeant for the town of Dighton, which is where Karen Reed's parents live. And Trooper Proctor and Buchanan went there to get Karen's vehicle. She had driven to her parents' house, was parked there, so they were towing her vehicle back to the Canton police station. So Barrows was along because this home was in his jurisdiction. So what was most interesting about this witness, who was just there to sort of bridge the gap and say he was present, was the way he described Karen Reed's damaged taillight.
And at some point, did you make any observations of the right rear part of that Lexus SUV?
I did.
And what, if anything, did you observe about that area of the vehicle?
I saw that there was some damage to the right rear taillight. To my best ability and recollection, that taillight was not completely damaged. It was cracked, and a piece was missing, but not completely damaged.
And then beyond the taillight area of that vehicle, what, if anything else, did you observe as far as damage to the rear passenger side area?
Like a dent on the rear quarter.
When you're
So he is saying that the damage to the vehicle was minor. So that means the crack that Karen Reed got, as she believes, when she backed into that other vehicle, as the prosecution believes when she hit John O'Keefe, that crack wasn't all that big. Now, of course, it could have gotten bigger as the vehicle was towed. That certainly couldn't have happened. But what the defense is going to argue is it got bigger because Trooper Proctor made it bigger in order to get some pieces to scatter at the scene. And that's why those pieces were discovered later in days following, because he was scattering more pieces at the scene. So and I wanted you to hear too, the way Trooper Proctor described the damage he saw at that same exact time.
coming up the driveway and you're passing by the defendant's vehicle, you mentioned some damage that you observed to the right rear passenger side area. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you describe to the jury what it was specifically that you observed as far as damage to that area of the vehicle?
Yeah, the right rear taillight had such large pieces missing from it.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull that out so that we can talk, and it's time for questions too. So if you have some questions, if you would put those in the chat, and if you would put some question marks at the beginning, it makes it a lot easier to spot. It's kind of hard to spot as it's scrolling by. So I thought the difference between the way they described it was really important, because you've got Barrows saying that the taillight was not completely damaged, some damage, that he observed a dent on the rear quarter and it was cracked and a piece was missing. That was his description. And then you've got Proctor saying it had large pieces missing from it. So those are sort of different ways of describing it. Are they just different ways of looking at the same thing, or were those two entirely different descriptions? That's something the jury is going to have to decide. So let's, excuse me. So I want to say thank you to Jackie P. for gifting a lawyerly membership. We appreciate that very much. And Betty Rubble did as well. Thank you both. Marlon will be very happy. We have 2 fabulous mods here, Marlon and Mama Pinks. Marlon has a new mod emoji for them, and it will be unlocked when we get 30 more members. So he is really we're all looking forward to seeing the new emoji that's been prepared. And you can put it in, if you're a member, you can use it during our live streams or in the comments. So let's see. Also, I have a question from Boda Bob saying, my understanding is that Proctor worked for the Norfolk County DA's office. Is this true? If so, does the DA condone this behavior? So he did say that he was assigned to the DA's office in his role with the department. So I think that that's just sort of an assignment. Would they condone it? No, I'm certain they would not. I guarantee you they would not. On the other hand, they can't fire him in the middle of trial. It would just look bad. He is, as we understand, under some kind of federal investigation related to this case, but we don't know a lot of details about it. It's not something that's going to be presented to this jury. There are questions where people will say, well, isn't it true you testified at such and such a day and you said this, but it's not something where we get a full transcript or anything along those lines. So Tina T is remembering the Justice for All movie. Al Pacino gets up yelling at the judge, I'm not out of order. You're out of order. You're all out of order. There is some truth to that, Tina. I have to agree with that. Oh, Betty Rubble gifted 2 lawyerly memberships. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Valerie Snyder is a new member. So that is great. Really appreciate all of that. So let me flip over and I'll have to go back a little ways and find where the question marks get started. Y'all are chatting fast. So I have to move back. I don't think that's the first one. Let's see. All right. Maybe it is. I see one from Blurry Lights. Hopefully I can find that again as I scroll back down without getting question time. There's Mama Pink's message. Okay, no, here it is. Joe from Ohio says, if there was only one piece missing at the parents' house, how do so many end up at the scene? That's, I think, what the defense will argue. The defense will say, well, if there was just one piece missing, he didn't say small. I think he just said one piece. Then why are there not just multiple pieces at the scene, but several times over, they keep finding multiple pieces? We know the prosecution explanation. Prosecution says that's because the snow is melting. It was exposed for the first time. But the defense says, no, it's not. It's because Trooper Proctor was breaking out pieces and scattering them around in order to frame Karen Reed. S. Cipher wants to know, could this cause a mistrial? And I'm not sure if what you mean is the text messages. I don't think that would cause a mistrial. The goal of the defense would be not to try this a second time, but rather to get it so that there is, so that Karen Reed is acquitted. That would be their definite goal. Blake Cavany wants to know, when do you think we will hear from the medical examiner? Could be next. And that was certainly discussed today because of one of the strings of text messages from Trooper Proctor related to the fact that he had talked to the medical examiner, and the medical examiner, or at least, liaisoned with, and the medical examiner did not declare it a homicide. And his colleagues were ribbing him like, wow, you loser, couldn't get the medical examiner to call it a homicide. And I don't remember the exact words, but that was sort of the flavor of it. And he was clearly wanting that, and the medical examiner would not take it that far. That's something the jury is definitely going to have to consider. So when will we hear? I don't know. I think pretty soon. I don't think the prosecution has a lot left. I think they're sort of wrapping up. Elise Amber wants to know, do you think the prosecution fully lost the jury today? I don't think there's any way you can predict that, because juries tune in and out of certain evidence. And by that, I don't mean they don't listen to it. I mean, they decide it's important in context of the entire trial. And juries will just flat out surprise you. I always tell people that in my mediations is, there's a spectrum of juries. It isn't like there's one jury and it decides the same thing every time. There are a range of people who could be on that jury, and we don't know exactly who is on that jury. So do I think it's over? No, I don't think so. Art Garrett wants to know is if Lally is throwing the case. Not at all. No, I don't think. I think Lally would love to win this case, wants to win this case, believes in this case. I don't think he's faking it. Honeybee, do you think Proctor should be fired? I guess it's a legitimate question, Honeybee. I guess I'm not going to weigh in on that in the middle of trial. I'll just say this. I am appalled at what he said in some of these text messages. I'm floored. I can't believe he said these things. So I'll let them handle that within their personnel. But wow. KS, can Karen Reed sue Proctor for defamation? I don't think no, I don't think so. I don't think that would fit the facts here, given that he's the investigator. I haven't looked at the specific text messages to think of that, but I think he would have some kind of immunity because of the fact that he was investigating and working for the state. So I don't think so. And he didn't publish it either. I just have to think through it, but I don't, offhand, I don't see how that can be possible. Okay, Intuitive Karen, do you think the judge will throw the case out after the prosecution rests? No, I don't think so. I think it'll keep going. Hello, Kitty. What is the status of the FBI investigation into Proctor? Wouldn't we all like to know? Hello, Kitty. We don't know, but boy, it sure would be something interesting. Denise Pelton, do you now feel Karen could have been set up? Denise, I'm trying hard not to express sort of an ultimate opinion in the case. I'll say, okay, this evidence is not going to fly, but I try not to say, I think this side should win and this side shouldn't. So I try to wait until the case is over. And that way I feel like people from both sides can listen and learn the facts without feeling like they have to believe something to watch this channel. That's more my goal. Jen V, do you think he should be fired for his comments about her? Same question. Okay. High Desert RN, how are texts between officers? I'll answer that question at the end too. How about that? High Desert RN, how are texts between officers entered into evidence and how are those found? Normally, I think it would be rare that you would get these. I don't know if they did. They showed how many let me start over with that whole train of thought. Okay, so the prosecution put these into evidence in short little packets. So they would say, this is your text messages between you, Trooper Proctor, and your sister, and how many total were there? And it would say, 6,000 or some large number. And the prosecutor would say, Lally would say, that's not all 6,000. And Trooper Proctor would say no. So obviously they were culling down and picking out just the ones relative to this case. And I assume that that's how and why they got produced, is because they were relevant to this case and therefore subject to production by the prosecution. That's my guess of how this came out. Linda Horton, if the damage to the taillight simply and innocently got bigger as it was being towed, how did the pieces end up on the lawn? Good question. That's exactly the defense question. That's an excellent one. Melissa J. Richley wants to know, how does Proctor know what sizes of any pieces of taillight are missing? I think what sizes or how many pieces of taillight are missing. I'm not sure exactly, but that's also true, though, of the other witness who said a piece was missing. Trooper Proctor says large pieces were missing from it. So how did either one of them know that? I don't know. Either that it was one or that it was many seems like a difficult question. You could certainly say it was this big, that big. You could gesture with your hands, but to say it was little or big is fairly subjective. Let me head over. We've got some more new members. Denny Add and Valerie Snyder, welcome. We are delighted to have you join us. And Betty Rubble is a new member in addition to gifting lawyerly members. Thank you. An active new member. That's fantastic. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll do a few more questions and then call it a night, but we'll do a few more first. Zelda House Mom, would the officers ever be charged in a cover-up or for murder? It's possible. Well, if what you mean is Trooper Proctor and the people he was working with, would they be charged with murder? I don't see how. I don't think they were involved in any way. They came in after the fact. Now, if you're talking about Brian Albert, who is a Boston police officer and owned the home or someone else who was an active officer and involved, I guess that's possible. Do I think it's likely that someone else will be charged with murder in this case? I don't think it's very likely at all. Now, as far as whether anybody would be charged in a cover-up, that is really difficult to answer. I think the question will lie with the federal investigation and what exactly they're looking into. And we don't know that, but sure are curious about what exactly is going on in that investigation. Kathy Barella wants to know, can the prosecution go back and charge the witnesses that Karen's defense team is accusing of the cover-up? Certainly, they could be charged. I don't think there's any reason why they could not be charged, but everything the prosecution has done is said that they don't believe they have any role in this. So I think it would be unlikely, not impossible, not legally impossible, but I don't see it happening. All right. How do people, Lily has a good question. How do people accept a membership if it's offered? And I will ask Mama Pinks to put that in. She sent it to me and explained it. I don't remember all the details. So Mama Pinks, if you would put that in the chat, that would be great. Because you do have to click something that says, yes, I'd like to accept a membership. So I'm looking through for maybe 2 more questions. Bodega Lady wants to know, is it typical to only have one prosecutor conducting the entire trial solo? I thought they worked in teams. That is more likely. And you will notice there are other people sitting there at the table and around him. So he's not the only person working on the case, but he is definitely the only person we've seen up in court. And he's the only one who's been examining the witnesses. And it is unusual. Prosecutors tend to have more than one person for a really large case like this. Now, for a smaller case, it would be very typical for there to be a single prosecutor. But in a case this big, this long, this sensational, this public, then I would have expected there to be more. That does surprise me. Margarita has a comment. There were some instructions to his team using his personal phone. And yes, that's why it would be considered work phone. And it was something where he was commenting directly on the investigation he was charged with for work. So I do think that is exactly why it was considered relevant and something that had to be produced. There probably was argument about that in advance, but I don't know what happened in those early arguments over that. So Tommy has a question. So if Karen Reed hit him and she was in the street, how did the pieces of taillight get up on the grass? I can't answer that. No telling. I don't know. Michael L. wants to know, how is it possible that 12 first responders and cops could not find all of the pieces, the baseball cap and the tennis shoe, when at the time he's saying there were only 1 to 2 inches of snow on the ground? Notice I said inches and not inches. Thank you. So that is exactly the defense argument. They think that the pieces that were there were scattered and maybe even increasingly so. And when they weren't all found, either new ones were put there, or when they weren't all found, people went back to make sure that additional ones be found. So that's definitely the defense theory about how they got there. Lynn McLaughlin, this will be our last question. Wasn't there also a reference in the text to going in with the medical examiner to assure the right outcome? There's definitely a series of text messages we heard today related to wanting the medical examiner to find homicide, and the medical examiner would not. That, of course, is also a problem for the prosecution, because it means that the jury has now heard the medical examiner didn't see this as a homicide. What does that mean? Well, probably that the medical examiner thought it was just not something that could be determined one way or the other, which was probably a legitimate and very reasonable read of the evidence that was available to the medical examiner. So I want to thank Marlon and Mama Pinks for being our moderators tonight. Thank you so much. We will be back with you. I may well go live tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, but I for sure will go live on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we will get the rest of the cross-examination of Trooper Proctor. It's going to be amazing. You definitely don't want to miss that, and we'll break it all down, talk about it on Wednesday. I will see you then.